So, welcome to the Oxford Clay Pottery Podcast. I'm Catherine Tomlinson and I started an eco conscious pottery company called Oxford Clay. Now, at Oxford Clay, I don't just make pottery, I also make resources such as books and courses and information for other potters who want to be more eco-conscious in their pottery practice but maybe don't know where to start or can't find out the information they need. So that's what this podcast is all about. It's about sharing everything I've learned along my eco-conscious pottery journey with you, and I can't wait to get started. So let's go. Hello, welcome back to the Oxford Clay and Pottery Podcast. I'm excited about today's episode because it's all about the circular economy, and how the opportunities for potters, with this concept of the circular economy. Okay, let's get started. I've been reading loads about the circular economy recently, and it's one of those situations where, like the more you read, the more you think, oh, just get sort of more and more ideas in your mind. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and do a kind of succinct episode on this. Um, so let's get started. Okay, so um, the circular economy is it's basically the idea that rather than okay, so for the last 200 years we've been using a linear economy model. Okay, so the linear economy is basically like, we use natural resources, we make them into something, and then we use it, and then we throw it away, and those kind of resources are kind of lost. Circular economy is where we are still using natural materials, but we are regenerating them. Like when we've used them once, we might be regenerating them into like something else, or we might be then taking them and completely recycling them into a completely new thing. And those resources are basically never lost. If you think about the way nature works, it's the same thing. It's like none of those resources are ever lost. They're just kind of, they're getting incorporated all back in, back in, if you think about composting, like back into the earth, and then plants are growing again, and then the leaves are falling, and then it's composting again. So that's the essential idea about the circular economy. So I want to just read you out a couple of sort of just key quotes, really, to kind of hopefully illustrate this a bit more. Okay, so this is from a book called Doughnut Economics: 7 Ways to Think Like a 21st Century Economist, and which is by Kate Raworth. So this is one of the kind of, I guess, like most well-known texts on the circular economy. And this is what Kate Raworth says about a linear economy. So it says, so she's saying that because the last 200 years of industrial activity have been based upon a linear industrial system whose design is inherently degenerative. So, the essence of that industrial system is the cradle to grave manufacturing supply chain of take, make, use, lose, extract the earth's minerals, metals, biomass, and fossil fuels, manufacture them into products, sell those on to consumers who probably sooner rather than later will throw them away. Okay. So, what's really tricky about this is that when I was thinking about this in terms of pottery, it's actually very similar to the pottery making process, just in general. So we're using natural resources, we're kind of crafting them into something. We're then molecularly changing that clay. The clay is becoming vitrified. We can't turn it back into like wet clay again because we're firing it. And then we've got this like pot at the end, that is then there are limited options really to recycle that pot. I mean, yes, we can repair it, and yes, pots last for like, hundreds, possibly even thousands of years. But, if that pot does break, we can't necessarily like easily reclaim the resources from that pottery. So yeah, it's really got me thinking about the ways that we can actually use the circular economy concept in pottery. So let me read you out the circular economy bit that Kate Raworth talks about. Okay, so this is the circular economy. The circular economy takes flight, this section. This is on page 220 of Doughnut Economics. Okay, so industrial manufacturing has begun the metamorphosis from degenerative to regenerative design through what has come to be known as the circular economy. It's regenerative by design because it harnesses the endless inflow of the sun's energy to continually transform materials into useful products and services. Okay, so it says there's another little bit I just wanted to read you, which is the two cycles become the butterfly's two wings. Okay, she's talking about like the different resources, the different kind of types. So she's talking about how they belong to two nutrient cycles: biological nutrients such as the soil, plants, and animals, and technical nutrients such as plastics, synthetics, and metals. So the two cycles become the butterfly's two wings, in which materials are never used up, inverted commas, and thrown away, but are used again and again and again through cycles of reuse and renewal. Okay, right. So how on earth could potters possibly use that? Like I've said, pottery doesn't really lend itself to this kind of this cycle, but there are loads of things, materials that can go into pottery that are part of this circular economy. So we can kind of be part of like the kind of in a way like the secondary part, where say like a material is being used already, we can then take that waste and we can incorporate it into our pottery. So let me tell you what I mean. Okay. So think about some different materials that we could actually incorporate into our pottery that have already been used, and essentially they're already in the supply chain. We don't have to be using those raw materials. Okay, so the first one that came to mind is metals. Okay, so as potters we can actually recycle copper and iron, both of those two metals. We can recycle those metals back into oxides that we can use to color our pottery. So if you're interested to know how on earth you do that, it's detailed in Eco-Conscious Pottery Glazing, that book, which is available from the Oxford Clay website. So yeah, in that book, I go through the fact that you can actually oxidize copper using salt and vinegar, and it creates this pigment called verdigris, which potters, we can harvest this pigment, we can use it in our pottery, we can even use it to color glazes. So you can either paint it on or you can use it to color glazes. And similarly with iron, with rust, you can actually use iron to color, you can use rust to color pottery. So yeah, very exciting. We can use metals that are kind of waste metals. I actually use for copper, I actually use electrical goods, like broken electrical goods, which I buy from a charity shop, give them more money than they would if they were just selling it for scrap. I strip the wire from these electrical goods, and then I use salt and vinegar to oxidize that copper wire, and then that's how I create the color in my pottery. So yeah, so that's great. It's like taking a waste product, it's like reutilizing it into something completely different, like keeping the value. Yeah. So okay, so that's one way. So I'm interrupting this episode to tell you about a totally free guide I've made just for you on how to make your own pottery glaze recipe. So if you are a total beginner to glaze making and it's something you've wanted to maybe try, but you're not really sure where to start, this guide is specifically designed to take you through all the steps you need to know from start to finish, all the ingredients you need, all the equipment you need, and also how to fire your pottery glaze at the end. So, even if you're not new to glaze making and you just want a pottery glaze recipe that's very simple and specifically made with eco conscious ingredients, then this guide is also for you. So, you can get the guide in the show notes, there's a link, but also you can go on to the Oxford Clay website at www.oxfordclay.co.uk/resources for potters. Okay, let's get back to the episode. Um, okay, the next way is we can actually also recycle glass into our pottery. So the really cool thing about glass is that if you think about blue glass is actually coloured with cobalt, and cobalt is one of the most kind of tricky ingredients in pottery. So cobalt colours pottery blue, and it creates beautiful colours in pottery. Um, that you really can't get from any other kind of source, yet. We haven't had the innovation yet, but, so, cobalt has been used for, a long time to make blue in pottery. But the problem is with cobalt is that, cobalt has a really big artisanal mining sector, so people working in the artisanal mining cobalt sector, they're mining cobalt without any, you know, without very much regulatory protection. They're working in very dangerous conditions. Cobalt is mixed, in the supply chain, so we can never really tell whether that cobalt is has been mined by somebody working in really dangerous conditions or it's been mined commercially. They're mixed and they both go into the supply chain. So what we can do about this is we can use cobalt that's already, if we want to make blue in our pottery, we can use cobalt that's already in the supply chain in the form of blue glass. Yeah. So, glass isn't suitable for like all pottery. You wouldn't necessarily really be able to use it on, you know, like pottery that you're going to eat off or something. But for decorative pottery, it's absolutely fantastic. So the way I use cobalt, the way I use glass in my pottery, the cobalt blue color, is I basically crush up glass, which is post-consumer glass. It's glass that's already been used for its use. Like, containing something, and then I crush it up, and then I basically very gently brush, obviously with safety equipment. I use an FFP3 face mask. I'm not breathing in glass dust. Use gloves, make sure I don't, make sure I'm really super careful. But I basically crush it up with a pestle and mortar, stone pestle and mortar, and then I just put that glass very gently into grooves in my pottery. So I make these dragonfly and butterfly designs, and then the glass, I just push the glass gently into those designs, and then when it fires this like beautiful blue color. So it's a way of using up that glass, post-consumer glass, in and making, in pottery, making absolutely beautiful pottery. It's like sort of a jewel like effect in pottery. So that's another thing that we can use. Okay, and then the final thing I want to talk to you about is plant ashes. Okay, so plant ashes is something that I do talk about a lot, and I love experimenting with different plant ashes in glazes. So essentially, you can actually use, if this is the first time you're hearing about this, you can actually use ashes from plants. So say, like, for example, you had a bonfire or something, or you had a fire to heat your home and you were burning hardwood or something in your wood burning stove. The ash that's left from that is actually an amazing ingredient in a pottery glaze. So I use this incredible recipe, which is just one of the best glaze recipes I've ever found for using ashes in glazes, and it's 40% ash. So you can use any plant ash. You can use wood, leaves, um, literally any plant material, and you can see what it looks like in a glaze. So they'll look different depending on like the chemical makeup of the plant, but yeah, so you can use, recycled ashes from someone's, like, fire. Say, like, someone's heating their home with a fire, wood burning stove. You can ask them for that ash. You can use that ash, and then you can make a glaze. So it's 40% ash, and that ash is just sieved into a very fine powder, again with safety equipment. Um, and then it's 40% Cornish stone. So that is a raw material, but 40% of that glaze is not a raw material that is having to be mined from the earth. It's a renewable source of pottery material. So they're really good, really exciting. And then the final bit is 20% of the glaze is quartz. So it's like ground up quartz. So those two materials, Cornish stone and quartz, they're available from pottery suppliers. But then you can make your own ash. You can make it from locally sourced ingredients. You can what I've been doing recently, which I've been yeah, spending a lot of time doing recently, for the last couple of years, I've been collecting different leaves that have fallen naturally from plants, fallen naturally from trees, um, mainly trees, but some shrubs as well. And then I've been burning those into an ash, and then I've been making glazes from them. And because leaves often have like the most kind of trace minerals, metals, trace metals in them, they can often create sort of really beautiful colors in glazes, and very subtle colors. It's not kind of like the very bright blue of like a cobalt glass, but it's cobalt pigmented glass, but it's yeah, you can get like really beautiful colors anyway, like sort of really subtle kind of bluey white, speckled colours. Sometimes you get kind of a yellowy, browny, green tinge to glazes. Yeah, so if you wanted to learn more about actually how to make pottery glazes from plant ashes, there's a book which goes through kind of it's got like how to do this on the so both of these books are available on the Oxford Clay website. So one is pottery glazing with plant ash, so that book is available from the Oxford Clay website. That's got 60 different tests of plants. So that's using the wood from plants, the stems. It's using just soft tissued plants. It's using woods. It's just showing you what all of those look like. But then recently, the most recent book I've done is actually making glazes with leaf ashes, and I've just found this to be it's my new favorite thing to do, basically. So they're all made with naturally fallen leaves. So I just collected the leaves when they'd naturally fallen from the plant. So obviously that plant's not needing those leaves anymore. So that's a kind of, in a way, a truly regenerative material in pottery, because that plant's always going to be growing new leaves, and then it's always going to be losing them when it doesn't need them anymore. It's part of its natural growing cycle. We can collect these leaves up, we can dry them, they are pretty dry when they fall off, but like we want to dry them a little bit more, and then making them into an ash, then we can make into a pottery glaze. So yeah, so if you wanted to learn more about that, that's in Leaf Ash Glazing, a guide to sustainable pottery glazing with fallen leaves. So like I said, all of those are available from the Oxford Clay website if you're interested in those. But yeah, there's some really, really lovely glazes made just with leaves that have fallen off naturally. Okay, so yeah, so those are some ways that we can incorporate materials, like using concept of the circular economy into our pottery. But if you think about practices, there's probably some other practices we can do as well. So, like for example, if it's available to us, we could use renewable energy to power our kiln. Say if we fire with an electric kiln, or we're using any kind of electricity in our pottery making practice, we can use renewable energy for that if it's available to us where we live in our region. Yeah, so that's another way, because it's like taking, again, it's that concept of taking a renewable source, something that is the sun or wind or something, water power, and then turning it into a resource that then is like kind of never ending. It's always going to be there. We're always using it up, and then going, we're using the circular economy concept with the power we're using for pottery. So yeah, right. I try to keep this episode like quite succinct and quite short, because like I said, the more you read about the circular economy, the more you're just like, wow, there's so much to learn, and so much for kind of businesses to learn. It's kind of like there's this whole concept of how it's providing a new model for business, and and like I said, it can be quite hard to see how it can apply to a very linear process like pottery, but I'm excited for the future, for innovation. So yeah, part of being a potter is this incredible like adaptability that we have, because we're like so close to the materials we're making. Essentially we're making that choice. We are the production kind of agents our pottery. So, if there's any innovations in pottery materials, we can be at the forefront, incorporating these into our practice. So, yeah, it's super exciting, and we can be super responsive to all these kind of really cool technologies that are coming out, and making our own recycling materials, or making our own oxides, and yeah, it's a really exciting time. So, really exciting concept for pottery. I've loved talking to you about the circular economy, and thinking of ways we can apply it to our pottery practice. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Oxford Clay Pottery Podcast. And until then, wishing you very happy potting, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye. Oh, yeah. So I hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you're interested to learn more about eco conscious pottery, or making your pottery more eco conscious and sustainable, there's so much for you on the Oxford Clay website, which is www.oxfordclay.co.uk. I can't wait to see you there.